The China-United States relations is often talked about as the centerpiece to the world's political and economic health, but should the China-Japan relationship be mentioned in the same breath? According to the IMF, the world's second and third largest economies contributed 22% to the global GDP growth in 2015. That's equal to the European Union and 2% below leader the United States. This is whilst bilateral trades between the two countries came in as the third largest in the world, registering a whopping $340 billion in 2014.
I think that China-Japan relationship is very important in East Asia because we are both the second and third economy in the world. So our cooperation could do a lot of things to contribute to the global economic growth. But if we are going to some confrontation or conflicts, that could be affect not only the region, but the whole global economy. That's why China-Japan relationships is very important in the region and also in global economy.
But there is also room for more. Analysts say lingering historical and security disputes are somewhat holding back a geo-economic prosperity that can lead the world, and that both countries should not let cold politics influence hot economics. And in walking the walk, the upcoming Beijing-Tokyo Forum in December serves to do just that.
China-Japan relations has been a downslope in recent years, it's true. However, I'd like to pay more attention to the new turnaround of China-Japan relations, especially on the people-to-people exchanges in recent 2 years. According to the survey data, more than 70 or 80% of respondents in both countries believe that it's very important for the public diplomacy between the two countries.
Meanwhile, CIPG's Vice President Wang Gangyi said in a statement that December's forum will focus on providing constructive advice to enhance bilateral cooperation based on previous experiences. And as this year marks the 45th anniversary of the normalization of ties between the two countries, the eyes and the ears of the world are turning to the future cooperation in the coming months and years. So what will it take for China and Japan to cooperate closer than ever before? Let's find out more on this month's edition of China Watch. Hello and a very warm welcome to our viewers in China and around the world. This year marks a crucial period for the world's second and third largest economies. China's President Xi Jinping has been re-elected for another 5 years to boost growth based on innovation and consumption at home. And Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has just won a snap election and is in the running for a historic third term. And he is also working for a more aggressive economic growth that has delivered Japan's strongest labour market since the mid-1970s. But in the midst of all of these, what are the visions of both leaders for the China-Japan relations? The first question, I'll go to Professor Ding Yifang first. Why does smoother China-Japan relations matter to the world?
Actually, China and Japan are both second and third largest economy in the world. So we both are in the global production chain. So China and Japan's cooperation could maintain this global production chain, can provide more incentives to global growth, and that will provide consumers all around the world cheaper goods and better quality goods.
I would like to add one more point. The U.S.-Japan alliance is the basic security structure in the Asian Pacific. It was so important for both Japan and the United States. So if there are serious problems between China and Japan, the United States will be deeply involved in this. I don't think the United States would like to take side in that sense. That's why they are deeply concerned.
Let me ask you, Mr. Usui Hiroyuki, in terms of the Sino-Japanese relations, what do people in Japan think?
So I think now the Japanese public is perceiving that the relations between the two countries are not so good. But I'm afraid they are frustrated because for more than 100 years, Japan was ahead of China in terms of modernization, learning the Western civilization. But now they are losing. So I'm afraid the Japanese public are frustrated and feels in some way threatened because of the economic advancement of China.
So this month, the Beijing-Tokyo Forum is taking place. I think this forum is it has a unique selling point in the sense that it has a public poll. It conducts public polls both in Japan and both in China. What's the role of the public in these forums? What's the view in Japan?
So, of course, the role of the public is important, but what is the problem in Japan is that for example, newspapers, media are reporting about the Sino-Japan relationship, but the Japanese society still now is segmentalized into big companies. Their influence is very great, and so journalists. So in Japan there are freedom of speech, freedom of press, but journalists not always can report according to their own viewpoint. This problem, and the Japanese public is not always correctly reported.
So, which brings me to the next question. My question is about actually Abe's attitude towards China. So, for example, at the moment we all know that he's aiming to revise the pacifist constitution, legalizing Japan's armed forces. On the other hand, in September this year, he attended the Chinese National Day reception at the Chinese embassy in Tokyo.
I think that actually the intention to amend the Japanese so-called peaceful constitution is a familiar matter for Shinzo Abe. Since his grandfather, so they tried several times. It never succeeded, but nowadays, Shinzo Abe has been prime minister. He controls the majority and almost the two-thirds majority in Japanese Congress. So legally speaking, he has the only opportunity to succeed in these tentatives. So that's why I think he will continue to try to amend the Japanese constitution to make Japan a normal country. But in order to mitigate the hostility from China and to alleviate the tension from China and Japanese, he also wanted to show the goodwill from his side to Chinese. That's why he attended Chinese national reception in Chinese embassy to show that he's not, he's not systematically hostile to China.
For example, in May this year, State Councillor Yang Jiechi, he held a meeting with the friendship groups of Japan in Tokyo. So in a statement he said, I would just like to read it out. The two sides must cherish the sound tradition and unique advantage of bilateral non-governmental friendship. And the Chinese government is willing to provide a strong backing for the cause of bilateral non-governmental friendship. So that's from the Chinese Foreign Ministry website. My question is this way of China saying to keep politics and economics separate?
Not really, because the political relationships have tremendous impact on economic relationship, that's for sure. But when we said Chinese government appreciate much the non-official relationship between China and Japan, it's because we know that if we strengthening the relationship between people to people, contact between Chinese people and Japanese people, that will pay the healthy foundation for our two countries' relationship in the long run.
You know, if you look at China and Japan, we are neighbors for thousands of years. The sound, relationship between the peoples are very close. That's I think, characteristics of Japanese-China relations. Very close culturally, geographically, yeah, we share a lot. So in that sense, how to, make use of this kind of resources to improve the bilateral relations. I think State Councillor Yang's comments, the emphasis was on this. Make use of this kind of resilient people-to-people relations.
But as a Japanese citizen living in China, how do you feel? What's your feeling on China? How do you feel living in this country?
So there are a little less than 10,000 Japanese in Beijing, and at least people I met here, many of them say they were worried before coming to Beijing because they heard about air pollution or anti-Japanese attitudes of the Chinese public. But almost all of them say if they came here, they found that living in Beijing is exciting. They didn't have trouble and became friends with the Chinese, and also visitors. So I think the personal experience is very important. So you should not always believe what they are, the media are saying, but you have personal experience.
So the next question is about a possible trade war. So let's consider this question the worst case scenario. Is it possible that there will be a trade war between China and Japan?
Well, what's the scenario always exists, but it seems to be quite unlikely. I mean, it's the trade war between China and Japan in the foreseeable future. You know, the bilateral trade relationship, I think it's quite complementary, quite healthy, and quite balanced. If there were a trade war, that's more likely between China and the United States, or Japan and the United States. It's a big, you know, trade deficit structure, the trade structure. You know, I don't think it's, you know, it's likely between China and Japan.
What do you think is going to be the biggest story in the two countries' relations from your standpoint?
I hope that China must do more to attract Japanese tourists to China. And nowadays, so as China has very ancient civilization, and a lot of tourist destinations are related to that history. But I'm afraid that is not enough to attract Japanese young tourists to China. Japan was successful to develop some popular culture to attract the young people of the world, animation, manga, and the like. And I think China also should develop something to attract young people of the world so that they want to come to China.
What do you think the story is going to be? I mean, what kind of stories that people should look out for in the China-Japan relations going forward?
Now, from the the meetings of the top leaders, I think they want to improve the bilateral relations. They are not very satisfied with the current situations. I mean, it's economically, culturally so close, so interdependent, but politically it's not so close. And why should we, it's in this kind of situation? In that sense, that's can explain why top leaders want to make use of the timing.
The stories that you think is going to be big, that people will say, okay, we should look out for that.
I think that we have to push forward this kind of people-to-people exchange. We should enlarge the contact between Japanese people and Chinese people. Not only this Beijing Tokyo Forum, but we should create much more forums like these to enhance this kind of people-to-people dialogue. Then we should solve all the psychological problem between Chinese people and Japanese people.
As 2018 marks the 40th anniversary of the China-Japan Peace and Friendship Treaty, the consensus among experts say the China-Japan relations should be more closer than ever. And we'll see in the coming months and years if that will come to fruition. This is China Watch. Thank you for watching.